Last May on the House floor during the voter ID debate, Representative Marion Greene brought forth a compelling argument against the bill, giving some history of her family and how it molds her views on this topic. She's here now to go into a little more depth on the issue. Representative Greene, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Julie.
That introduced my first question for you. Tell us a little bit about what your family experienced and how it did kind of, again, shape your views on this particular topic.
Thank you. Yes, as I mentioned on the House floor, my parents worked in the Foreign Service for the U.S. government, civil servants working outside the United States, and they voted absentee regularly throughout their entire careers. And the current bill, whether it's a constitutional amendment or passes as statutorily, sets up ambiguous requirements for absentee voters, and I'm concerned that it'll disenfranchise people who are living outside the U.S., whether they're working for the U.S. government, in the private sector, in the armed services. I'm concerned that steps that we've taken to enable those people to vote and participate we're going to move backwards.
So how would you like to see the language tightened to include absentee voters?
I don't support the bill,
right.
So I think that brings me really to my kind of number one reason why I don't support the bill, which is that it's a solution looking for a problem. We don't have a problem. We could get concerned that 38, I believe, when county election officials were polled, 38 felons tried to vote. But this bill doesn't address that issue. And we don't have a voter impersonation problem in Minnesota. And I really would turn actually even to the testimony of the lawyer in charge of former Senator Norm Coleman's recount effort, who said, you know, we looked for fraud and we just didn't find it.
Okay, and adding to that, now roughly six states nationally did pass voter ID laws this past year. Now, is there anything that could be done, any language that could be inserted, policy that would change your mind and you could support this?
Well, something that they've done, I believe it's in North Dakota, I think is very interesting, where they have people who don't have an ID on the day of an election can swear or affirm that they are who they say they are. So something like that would give me comfort. But I will say that the Minnesota system is very similar to that today. So really, do we need this? Additionally, there's the cost. As we know from the session and the special session, Minnesota doesn't have a spare dime. And so I'm not sure that we want to spend it on something that's of questionable value.
And as we know, Wisconsin just incorporated a similar bill and a similar law, and during the recall election, they did ask for voter ID at the polls, but they did allow voters to vote if they did not have a photo ID with them. Were there any hiccups as far as you're aware? And do you think this might be a model for other states such as Minnesota? I'm
not aware of any hiccups, so I think that's an interesting example. I know that here in Minnesota, the proposal is to have people do a provisional ballot, and that is not a solution to me. A provisional ballot is not a real ballot, and the idea is that people participate and get to vote, and it's a right.
Okay, I want to ask you next a little bit about this upcoming legislative session. It is likely it's expected anyway, to pass the legislature as a constitutional amendment. Yeah. So if so, given that most polls do indicate that the majority of Minnesotans are in favor of voter ID, how actively will you campaign against this?
I'll campaign, it'll be some of what I talk about, but I will say that in other states, voter ID initiatives are now kind of mired in the court, and it's going up through the court system. So I think that also is a way that this is going to get taken care of. There are some other issues on the ballot next year that I feel very strongly about as well, and so I may be talking about them first. One thing I have noticed about this issue when I talk with friends and colleagues is that at first it sounds okay, what's wrong with showing an ID? As proponents say, we show one when we cash a check, we show one when we charge a burger at McDonald's. What's the problem? But the challenge is that not everybody has an ID, and and ordering a burger at McDonald's or cashing a check is not a right that we need to guarantee. And so I am concerned, and when I point this out to people, they're like, oh yeah, at first it feels painless, but in fact I think we're going to disenfranchise people, and it connects with a kind of ugly part of our history that we really don't want to go back to.
And will that be the message that you convey?
Yes, because I've found that in 2 seconds, as soon as I remind people of, well, wait a second, this is how it's worked in a negative way, people immediately get nervous and realize that, wait, you know, participating in our democracy is one of the great things about being an American, and we want to guarantee that.
On that note, Representative Greene, thanks so much for joining us on Capitol Report today. We certainly appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.